Well, I really had a knack for research, and I found out the entire history of the Federal Reserve System, which is the greatest swindle ever known in history, where a group of private bankers conspired criminally to take over the money and credit of the United States, which they did in 1913, and they passed the Federal Reserve Plan through the Democratic Party in Washington, D.C., and it became a law of Congress. And this law handed over to this private bank all of the money and credit of the United States, which was a pretty good day's work. And they've kept it ever since, because they set it up as a monopoly so that the stock of the Federal Reserve banks could never be traded publicly. It could only be handed down in a family, or if a corporation bought the bank that owned it, they became possessors of the stock. You've never been able to buy, since 1914, you've not been able to buy a share of Federal Reserve Bank stock on the market anywhere. And that is monopoly. That's what they have. It's a monopoly. You see, they're totally insulated against anyone buying control of the Federal Reserve System. And John D. Rockefeller was one of the biggest holders, and he had his stock placed under the Rockefeller Foundation, so it can never be bought or sold. So it's secure forever. And the other people who bought control in 1914, they were the Schiff family and the Warburg family. And of course, they still have their own family fortunes, and they have a controlling interest in Federal Reserve Bank stock in various Federal Reserve banks. It's not all in one Federal Reserve Bank, it's in a number of Federal Reserve banks. And I think most of the holders of Federal Reserve Bank have at least stock in at least 5 of the Federal Reserve banks.
What are the consequences of having the Federal Reserve control the monetary system of the United States?
Well, the consequences are very important, and they're never discussed by any economist in the United States. The Federal Reserve Bank is a central bank. A central bank, this is not taught in any economics class in the United States or in the world. A central bank is a bank of issue, which has the right to print all the money it wants. That's what a bank of issue means. You can print all the money you want. There's no control over it whatsoever. And right now, the Federal Reserve Bank is printing trillions of dollars, which are almost worthless, and they're looking for hyperinflation, actually, because it'll be a repeat of 1924 in Germany. But I think they've taken some precautions. It probably won't happen, because they've been through all that. They know exactly what happened. And in hyperinflation, the money becomes worthless to the point where you have to have a wheelbarrow full of currency, paper currency, to buy a loaf of bread, which is normally worth 18 cents at that time. So they don't want to go through that again, so they're taking care of that. But the Federal Reserve has printed so much of this paper fiat currency, debt money, that it's overloaded the world. China and Japan have trillions of dollars of our so-called national debt, which is our currency. And of course they know that when it goes, it goes. When a currency becomes worthless, then nothing's more worthless than currency becomes worthless. So they're staving off the inevitable by hedging and doing what they can. But once you buy this debt, this paper dollar currency, you're stuck with it unless you can find another sucker to take it off your hands. And there's nobody right now who wants any part of it. So China and Japan are stuck with it. And they bought this currency to maintain trade with the United States. That's all it was for. So in effect, we're financing our trade with China, trade with Japan by our Federal Reserve currency, which is neither federal, it's not federal, any more than the Federal Express Company is a federal company. And it has no reserves, because it doesn't need any current reserves, because it prints its own currency. If you can print your own money, what do you need of reserves? You just go and warm up the printing press and turn out another $10 billion.
And steal the gold.
So, and finally, it's not a system. It's called the Federal Reserve System. It's not federal, it has no reserves, and it's not a system, but I'm the only person in the world who's ever defined it in my works as a criminal syndicate. And that's what it is. It's a criminal syndicate, just like the Mafia, which is one of its subsidiaries, and the CIA, and all of the criminal syndicates work out of the Federal Reserve System. because that's what a Federal Reserve System is. A central bank is a group of bankers which have total control of a nation's economy. And they print their own money, print as much as they want to, and it eventually becomes worthless and through speculation. See, a central bank is set up for speculation. The Federal Reserve System was set up solely for speculation, and its author, Paul Warburg, who was a partner of Kuhn Company in New York, which, by the way, financed the Communist Revolution, financed the Hitler Revolution, and financed the Japanese entry into World War II. So I defined in my work that a central bank's principal role is for war finance, because war finance is the most profitable enterprise you can get into. And so if you're a banker, you're looking for the best investment you can make, which is a war. For instance, the Iraq War. Now, when they set up the Iraq War, Halliburton and Company, which is the oil production company, or an oil equipment company, actually, but it finances the big oil explorations. And they found out that, all companies found out that a war is the most profitable investment you can have. During World War I, Rockefeller, out of his patriotic goodwill, upped the price of oil 5 times to the U.S. government. That's how we won the war. And that's how he became, he was already the richest man in the world. And the richest man in the world wants to become the richest man in the universe, which is your next step, and apparently he made that. So that's what it comes. People wonder why a billionaire wants more money. Now, H.L. Hunt's sons and 4 sons, each one of them started off life at 21 with $1 billion at that time. And as you can imagine, they haven't thrown it away. So they were, on paper, they're worth about $2 billion apiece at the present time. But who knows what their holdings are.
How was the Federal Reserve set up?
Well, it was set up as 12 districts. See, we had 48 states in the United States at that time. So you would think that the logical way would be to set up a Federal Reserve Bank in each state and have the 48 Federal Reserve Banks. But instead, they carved the United States into 12 districts of their own, which they called Federal Reserve Districts. And these 12 Federal Reserve Districts are actually the government of the United States. They override the states and they override the federal government. And not many people know that. They don't know that this is the Federal Reserve System of the United States, the Federal Reserve Districts.
Why didn't the American people rise up or say something about it?
They didn't say anything about it because it was a hidden conspiracy. Now I'm always called a conspiratologist. People say I see conspiracies everywhere. But as I told a reporter for the Dallas Morning News a couple years ago in a front page story, I said I've never had to invent a conspiracy in my life. There are more conspiracies than I can possibly write about. So it's not a question of seeing conspiracies under every bed. It's a question of seeing conspiracies in every commercial activity and every political activity that goes on in this country. Because they always have a hidden agenda, which means that the conspirators have to keep their identities concealed. And it's always criminal in nature because they always have some criminal objective to obtain by operating this conspiracy. That makes it all persons involved in a conspiracy for a criminal purpose automatically become criminals, criminally liable. And that is the case of everybody who has anything to do with the Federal Reserve System. They're criminally liable for participating in a criminal conspiracy. And there's no other definition that